I walked into the reception hall in full uniform, pressed blues, polished shoes, and 4 silver stars glinting on my shoulders. The music stuttered. Conversations paused. Every fork, every flute of champagne froze midair. And for the first time in over a decade, my family saw me. Not as the disappointment, not as the quiet one or the difficult sister. Not as the girl they erased from invitations and group texts, but as a general in the United States Air Force. A woman who'd led troops through deserts and storms, who'd buried brothers in arms, and who'd held the line when cowards flinched, and who now stood, calm and silent, in a room where every chair had been assigned, except for mine. My mother's wine glass trembled in her hand. My father's jaw went rigid, and my sister, the bride, stared at me like I'd risen from the dead. I gave them a tight smile. I didn't need a seat. I hadn't come for cake. People love to talk about forgiveness. They act like it's some holy virtue, something you're supposed to give, no matter how many times you've been gutted. They say things like, but they're family, or you'll regret it if you don't go, as if blood grants people immunity from consequences. But forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned, and they hadn't earned a single thing. Still, I came, not for them, but because I wanted them to see what they threw away, and what I became in their absence. It started with a wedding invitation that never came. Not lost, not late, simply never sent. I found out about the wedding from a cousin's Instagram story, some blurry rehearsal dinner photo tagged in a venue 2 towns over. There was my sister, laughing, veil tucked behind one ear, arms wrapped around her fiancé. And there was my mother, my father, even my college roommate who my sister had befriended out of convenience. But not me. No mention. No call. No explanation. Just silence. And deletion. You'd think this was a story about a fight, a falling out, some dramatic event where I burned a bridge or cursed someone out at Thanksgiving. But no, I didn't do anything. And maybe that was the problem. I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my sister, Claire, the pretty one, the charming one, the girl who never failed at anything because someone always cleaned up behind her. And I enlisted, at 18, without telling anyone. My parents said I'd embarrassed them, said I was throwing away my potential, said they didn't raise me to take orders like a servant in a uniform. They didn't come to graduation, didn't call when I was deployed, didn't answer when I sent home letters from Qatar, or from the base in Germany, or from that storm-ridden runway in Guam, where I turned 27 alone with a packet of instant noodles and a cracked photo of my younger self in my wallet. I spent years making peace with their absence, but I never expected they'd go so far as to pretend I didn't exist. When I saw that Instagram post, something inside me didn't break. It clicked. Like a switch flipped, and all the grief hardened into steel. I didn't cry. I made a call. To a friend stationed nearby. And by the end of the week, I had a pass, a uniform pressed, and a plan. I wasn't going to crash the wedding. I was going to walk in like I belonged, because I had every right to. And they needed to see that the daughter they left behind didn't just survive. She rose. In our house, love was quiet, not the gentle, comforting kind, but the kind that only showed up when someone else was watching. We didn't yell, we didn't cry, we didn't hug unless it was for the Christmas card. My mother believed in appearances, my father believed in results, and both believed that Claire, my younger sister by 2 years, was their crowning achievement. She was the ballerina, the piano prodigy, the girl who brought home straight A's and trophies the size of small dogs, blonde and blue-eyed like she stepped out of a Hallmark ad, always knowing just what to say and when to say it. And me? I was the quiet one, tall, sharp around the edges, curious in ways that didn't fit into their suburban mold. I liked maps and machines and dusty books about ancient wars. I asked too many questions. I spent hours alone in the garage taking apart old radios and rebuilding them, just to see if I could make them speak again. My parents called me independent, like it was a diagnosis. At 10, I learned that the only way to be noticed was to achieve more. So I tried. Honor roll, debate team, science fairs. Even tried piano once, but I hated it. I liked order, structure, clarity. Music, to me, felt like guessing in public. No matter how hard I worked, Claire always seemed to be shining brighter. At dinner tables, I was asked about homework. Claire was asked about her dreams. When I won a statewide essay competition, my mom said, "That's nice, but no one reads essays." When Claire got the lead in a community play, she got flowers and a cake. It wasn't cruelty, it was indifference. And in some ways, that's worse. Because you can fight cruelty. But how do you fight being unseen? High school was when the gap became a canyon. Claire dated quarterbacks. I joined ROTC. She wore glitter and curled her hair. I wore boots and learned how to disassemble an M16 in under 2 minutes. She went to prom with a boy who cried when she dumped him. I stayed home and read Sun Tzu. She was light, I was shadow, and no one ever questioned it. Not teachers, not friends, not even extended family. Everyone seemed to agree. Claire was the one with the bright future. And I was the one who would figure something out eventually. Senior year, during a college prep dinner, my father looked up from his steak and said, "You'll apply to state, of course. We can't afford anything fancy." I nodded. But I had other plans. I didn't want to spend 4 more years watching Claire be the star while I paid rent with student loans and smallness. I didn't want to stay in a town that had already decided who I was. So I walked into the recruiting office one Tuesday afternoon with my worn sneakers and my clipped voice and said, "I want something bigger than this." They gave me forms. I filled them out the same night. When I told my parents, they stared at me like I'd told them I was becoming a thief. "The military?" my mom said, like it tasted wrong. "You don't even know what you're signing up for," my dad snapped. "It's not a playground." I didn't respond. I knew better than to explain freedom to people who had never questioned the fence. Claire, for once, said nothing. She just tilted her head, gave me a pitying smile, and said, "Guess someone has to be the black sheep." And that was that. I left 2 weeks after graduation. No party, no hugs, just silence and a heavy duffel bag. And honestly, it was the first time I could breathe. Basic training stripped everything away. Hair, habits, softness. But for the first time, I felt seen. Not because I was the best, but because I wasn't expected to be less. They yelled at us all the same. We bled the same, failed the same, succeeded the same. And when I passed every fitness test, every marksmanship eval, every leadership course, they didn't tell me to tone it down. They told me to go further. So I did. Over the next 15 years, I moved forward without them. I built a career, earned rank after rank, flew aircraft across continents, briefed generals, held command over lives. I watched friends die. I watched young soldiers grow into leaders. I learned what real loyalty looked like. And not once, not in all those years, did I get a call from home that said, "We're proud of you." Only the occasional forwarded newsletter, or a clipped response to my holiday messages. When I came home on rare leave, I was treated like a guest, not a daughter, not a sister, a ghost with medals. So when I saw the wedding post, the one where everyone I knew was glowing under fairy lights while I was overseas on duty, it didn't sting the way it should have. It clarified, because they hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. And I had finally stopped mistaking erasure for absence. I spent an hour scrolling through the wedding album before I realized what hurt the most. It wasn't the lack of invitation. It wasn't even the absence of a phone call or a text or a postcard pretending to care. It was the photos. Rows and rows of smiles and champagne and curated moments posted across 6 accounts. Claire in her off-shoulder dress, our mother beside her beaming like she'd birthed royalty. My father adjusting the groom's tie, proud and composed like some kind of patriarchal cornerstone. My cousin's kids tossing flower petals. My college roommate, posing as a bridesmaid. But no mention of me. No, "wish you were here." No, she couldn't make it. Not even a blurred background cameo. It was like I had never existed. Not as a sibling, not as a daughter, not as blood. I called the one cousin I still half trusted, Jamie. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, but she used to write me handwritten notes while I was deployed, the kind with doodles and lipstick kisses on the envelope. She picked up on the second ring. "Oh God," she said before I even spoke. "You saw it." "Just tell me the truth," I said. Did Claire tell people not to invite me? Or did they all just forget?" There was silence on the line. Then she said very quietly, "They didn't forget." My stomach dropped. "She didn't want you there," Jamie continued. "She said it would complicate the vibe, that you'd show up in uniform and make it about yourself, that you'd intimidate people." I laughed, but it came out more like a cough. "She said I'd intimidate people?" She said, "You'd bring the kind of energy that would make everyone feel small," Jamie whispered. "And your mom, she didn't fight it. She said, 'It's Claire's day. Let's keep it light.'" Keep it light. As if my very existence was too heavy for their curated celebration. I hung up before I could cry. I didn't want Jamie's pity. I didn't want anyone's pity. But for the first time in years, I felt something sharper than sadness. I felt rage. Not the explosive kind, not the kind you scream into pillows or punch walls over. The cold, surgical kind. The kind that forms when you realize people didn't just neglect you, they erased you. Deliberately. Strategically, with rehearsed smiles and matching centerpieces. Later that night, I opened a shared Google Drive link Claire had posted publicly, the full wedding gallery. I clicked through 346 images. One caught my eye. It was a family portrait taken under an arch of roses. Everyone lined up by generation, smiling like a Hallmark ad. Parents, siblings, cousins, spouses. Except, someone was missing. Not just me, but any mention of me. My parents posed like they only had one daughter. There was no empty chair, no toast for absent loved ones, no glance off camera that hinted at guilt. It was seamless. It was like watching a movie where you were supposed to be a supporting character, and your scenes were left on the cutting room floor. That's when I understood. They hadn't just left me out, they had replaced me, rewritten the narrative, recast the role of daughter with someone more agreeable, more photogenic, less military, less inconvenient. Claire had built an aesthetic, and I didn't match the wallpaper. So they painted over me. A few days later, I got a package in the mail from an old friend, someone I'd met at the academy, now stationed overseas. Inside was a plaque, engraved with my name and a note. 4 stars, full bird, and still standing tall. They'll never understand what that means. But I do. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me of something vital. My worth was never theirs to define. They didn't promote me. They didn't pin my wings on my chest. They didn't stand with me on the tarmac in 120-degree heat, leading younger women who finally believed they could take command too. I built my life without them. And yet, they still had the audacity to pretend it didn't exist. That's when I made the decision. Not out of pettiness, not out of bitterness, but clarity. If they wanted to erase me, fine. But I would make damn sure they remembered what they lost. The reception was held at a luxury estate north of the city. White stone courtyard, manicured hedges, string lights hanging like constellations between the pillars. From the parking lot, I could already hear the hum of laughter, the clink of wine glasses, the polished playlist of safe, pretty music. I had no invitation. No +1. No seat assignment. All I had was a dress uniform and 4 stars on my shoulders. I stepped through the front gate like I belonged, because in a just world, I would have. Heads turned before I even made it halfway across the courtyard. Conversations stuttered, laughter caught in throats, champagne flutes froze mid-sip. I didn't flinch. I had walked through sandstorms. I had stood on runways under fire alarms. I had comforted young soldiers who couldn't stop shaking after their first real deployment. A garden party full of shocked relatives wasn't going to scare me. My mother was the first to react. She stood near the head table, her champagne glass trembling in one hand, her mouth opened, closed, then pressed into a thin, practiced smile. I recognized that smile. It was the one she used when donors asked about me at fundraisers. The one that meant, control the optics. Don't let the cracks show. Next to her, my father looked like someone had sucker punched him in the gut. One hand gripped the back of a gold-rimmed chair. His eyes darted toward Claire. And Claire? She turned slowly. Her new husband froze beside her, confused. Her eyes swept me from head to toe, starting at the shoes, then climbing past the medals, past the ribbons, pausing just long enough to process the 4 stars on each shoulder. And then she blinked. I could see it. The flicker of panic. Because for one brief second, everyone had stopped looking at her. And they were looking at me. I didn't say a word, didn't smile, didn't scowl. I didn't owe them anything. Not anger, not peace, not closure. Instead, I nodded once, precise, controlled, and kept walking, slow and steady across the marble floor. Guests stepped aside, like parting for royalty, or maybe for a ghost they'd buried but never quite forgotten. I passed by aunts who once told me I'd grow out of my tomboy phase. I passed by uncles who toasted Claire's scholarship and ignored my deployments. I passed my old college roommate, now bridesmaid, who whispered my name under her breath and looked like she wanted to shrink into the floor. None of them said a word. Because what could they say? I stopped near the edge of the hall. Not too close. I wasn't here to steal her thunder. I didn't need to. I was the thunder, and in that silence, 10 seconds that stretched like rope, I watched them all begin to squirm. Not because I shouted, not because I made a scene, but because I existed. Because they had built a fairy tale on the lie that I wasn't part of the story, that I had vanished, that I was nothing more than a passing embarrassment they'd outgrown. And here I was, alive, decorated, standing taller than they ever allowed me to grow. Claire broke first. She stepped forward, fake smile cracking at the edges. "I didn't think you were back in the country," she said. Her voice tight, high. "I landed this morning," I said calmly. I didn't offer more. Let them fill in the silence. "Why, didn't you RSVP?" she asked. I met her gaze. "I didn't receive an invitation." The air shifted. People nearby glanced at each other, murmurs rippling through sequins and suits. Claire looked toward our mother, eyes begging for a script, but Mom stayed silent, and I knew why. Because no one expected me to show. They had written me out so thoroughly, so confidently, that the very idea of my return had never crossed their minds. "I hope I'm not interrupting," I added, voice soft but cutting. "It's a beautiful ceremony." Claire opened her mouth, but before she could speak, someone started clapping, slowly, from the back corner. A man in a navy jacket, one of the groom's friends maybe, someone I didn't know. Then another clap joined his. Then another, until half the room was applauding, not for me as a sister or even as a guest, but for the rank, the history, the weight of what I wore. I hadn't planned for it, but I didn't stop it. I just nodded once more, turned, and walked away. I didn't need dessert. I didn't need photos. I didn't need an apology that would never come. I had walked in so they could see what they tried to erase. And now that they had, I had nothing left to prove. I didn't look back when I left the wedding. Didn't wait for Claire to follow me out. Didn't hope for some last-minute apology, the kind people give when the guests are gone and there's nothing left to protect. I walked down the marble steps, the 4 stars on my shoulders glinting under string lights that no longer felt like they were meant for me, and finally exhaled. The cool night air wrapped around me like a promise. You did it. Not just the entrance. The release. They never reached out. Not the next day, not the next week. Not when the wedding photos went up, edited this time, carefully cropped to avoid the moment their forgotten daughter rose from the margins and took center stage for 15 silent seconds. In the version they shared with the world, I was invisible again. And I let them have it. I didn't argue, didn't comment, didn't ask for recognition because I didn't need it anymore. For a long time, I used to believe family was something fixed, something you're born into. A blood contract you can't escape, no matter how much it wounds you. But I've learned that family isn't made of names on a tree or seats at a holiday table. It's made of who stays when the crowd clears, who shows up when there's nothing to gain, who loves you not for what you represent, but for who you really are. And I've built that family, piece by piece. There's Angela, my old roommate from officer training, who now calls every Sunday just to swap soup recipes and war stories. There's Sergeant Morales, who drove 2 hours in the middle of the night when I had a panic attack after a funeral. There's Amir, who sends postcards from every country he's stationed in, even if it's just a dusty outpost with no Wi-Fi and 1 bar of service. There's my mechanic in San Diego, who learned to recognize when I'm having a rough week and always asks, "You need coffee or silence?" There's Milo, my rescue dog, who follows me from room to room like he's afraid the world might lose me too. These are my people, not bound by blood, bound by choice, by loyalty, by love that doesn't ask me to shrink. I moved earlier this year, sold the condo I bought with my re-enlistment bonus and settled in a small coastal town where no one knows my last name or my sister's smile. I volunteer at the local high school, teaching girls how to lead, how to speak, how to stand like they take up space. One of them asked me once, "Do you have kids?" I smiled and said, "Not the way you mean." But I see them that way. Every girl who walks into that classroom afraid to take command, afraid of being too much or too loud, or too serious. I teach them to stand straight, to speak first, to leave the room if no one's listening. And I teach them this too: you are not hard to love. You are just too bright for people who prefer the dark. Sometimes I still dream about the old house, the dining room with the fake fruit, the sound of Claire's piano practice bleeding through the walls, the way my mother's heels echoed down the hall when I forgot to fold the towels properly. But in the dreams, I'm never inside. I'm always outside, watching through the window, unnoticed, and I wake up grateful, because I don't live there anymore, not in memory, not in longing, not in shame. A journalist once asked me, after an award ceremony, what I considered my proudest moment. I think she expected me to say something dramatic: a rescue, a deployment, a medal. Instead, I said this: leaving behind the people who only loved the version of me that kept quiet. She stared, stunned, but then she nodded. Because some people get it, and some people never will. So no, I wasn't at the family Christmas. I didn't get a birth announcement when Claire had her first child. I wasn't tagged in any of the legacy posts, and my name won't be stitched into any heirloom quilt or remembered at a family reunion slideshow. But I am not lost. I am not missing. I am not ashamed. I am free. And when I sit by the ocean now, watching the tide roll in like clockwork, I think of how much I gave to people who never once clapped for me unless I was quiet. I think of how they taught me to disappear, and how I chose instead to stand. And I whisper this to every wave that dares to reach my feet: I am not a secret. I am not your regret. I am the story you'll never get to rewrite.